Opel, the somewhat sensible German brand, is expanding its model range with a new line of performance-orientated cars called GSe. It stands for Grand Sport Electric, and it's basically slightly higher performance plug-in hybrid models. It's going to appear in the Astra and also the Grandland. Now, you will be able to spot some of the GSe models by the slightly different bodywork that you'll see. So it has a sportier front end with this contrasting black color, but not all models will have this. So if you're not a fan of the all black bonnet, don't worry. Personally, I'm not really too into it. It looks a little bit like a parts bin special, or maybe it's been to the accident repair shop. It's not going to be to everyone's taste. The reason it does that is it is a little bit of a nod to Opel's performance past with models like the Manta GSe, but not everyone is going to get that, and most people will probably skip that and just go for a regular, maybe just a standard contrasting roof. Our test car is equipped with 19-inch wheels. They do look quite smart with this black and machine-faced finish. You get gloss painted bodywork rather than any sort of black plastic cladding around the sills. And then around the back you get the Grandland badging in black, as with the Opel symbol as well. And the boot wears a pretty distinctive looking GSe badge on the rear as well. Overall, it does look a little bit sportier than a regular Grandland. It's not over the top. You're not going to feel like you're turning up at school or at the office in something that's been, lifted from a Max Power magazine, but it just has a little bit of a sportier look to it. Surprisingly, there's not that much to differentiate this as the GSe model on the interior. Okay, the front seats do carry the GSe badge, but that's really it. You don't even get it on the steering wheel, which is a bit odd, because normally if you've got a Golf GTI or something like that, you normally get a little bit more to make it feel that little bit more special. The steering wheel, well, it's a slightly flat bottom design. There's some perforated kind of leather material on it, simply laid out. You've got nice physical buttons for everything, and everything feels fairly solid, I suppose. That's really what Opel interiors are like. I do like that you've got dials for the climate control and even the volume, and there's shortcut buttons for navigating through the touchscreen system as well. So if you need to jump between your smartphone mirroring and the car setting or the built-in nav, you can do that quite easily. You've also got a fully digital instrument display in front of you, although it doesn't really have that much configuration with it. There are paddles also on the back of the steering wheel for shifting up and down the 8-speed gearbox, although you're probably not really going to do that, even though you can in the sport modes. It tends to just leave it to do its own thing. Overall, the quality is quite nice in here, but there's just a lot of black plastic, and I think Opel could do a little bit more to lift this up. I mean, maybe some extra Alcantara to lift and give that sporty feel. It wouldn't go astray. Even a bit of a flash of yellow, since that seems to be the color that it's using as its signature shade for GSe. It wouldn't go astray, and it would help lift what is otherwise, well, I don't want to call it drab, but it's not the brightest or most exciting interiors around. Nevertheless, there's good amount of adjustment in the seats. Getting your ideal driving position is going to be quite easy. There's a lot of adjustment with the steering wheel as well, so in and out and up and down. It's going to suit drivers of all different heights and statures. And well, the view out's pretty good, but this A-pillar section is quite thick, and combined with the big mirror, it does create a bit too much of a blind spot for my liking. Where the Grandland does start to redeem itself is in the back. It is very roomy back here. Okay, it's only a 5-seat SUV, but it has plenty of room. I can get my feet in underneath the seat in front. I've got a good couple of inches spare knee room and pretty good shoulder and head room. For reference, I'm about 5'8", 5'9", and this driving seat is set up from my normal driving position, so I can very comfortably sit behind myself on a long journey. Okay, the middle seat, well, it's nice and wide, but the center console does extend back in a little bit more. that does creep into the amount of leg and foot space you have in the middle seat. It's a pretty common trait in these types of vehicles, so I'm not entirely going to mark it down for that. But there's only air vents back here, and I can't adjust them, so there's no 3-zone climate control. I don't even have any charge ports or USB here, so that's not ideal in terms of, you know, keeping those in the back entertained with their devices topped up. So I'm gonna have to knock Opel down on that. But overall, it's pretty good. I do like the fact that it has pretty big windows as well, so I'm not gonna feel too claustrophobic sitting in the back. Those 3 letters, GSE, they do take a little bit of explaining, and that will help you kind of properly understand what the purpose of this car is. It's Grand Sport Electric, and it basically means that this is the range-topping plug-in hybrid version of Opel's Grandland. It is a performance sub-brand, if you will, although I wouldn't put too much emphasis on the word performance. Yes, it is dialed up to 300 horsepower thanks to a 1.6 litre turbocharged petrol engine paired with an electric motor that gives a combined output of 300 horsepower. Not bad, but not earth-shattering figures either. So don't think that GSe is the alternative to Audi's RS or BMW's M division. It's not. Think of it more as a range-topping model, one with better specification. But don't just think equipment inside the car. This also has specially calibrated steering, which does have a slightly nicer feel. It's not exactly full-bodied, but there's a bit of life in there. And more importantly, and perhaps this is where the GSe does its best performance, is the suspension setup. It's really nicely dialed in for a car like this. Now, this is not the be-all and end-all of chassis tuning. I don't think Lotus engineers are going to suddenly be very worried. No, instead, well, this is just really nicely set up. It's not got the biggest wheels in the world, although admittedly I always think they could be at least 1 inch smaller. But it's how it absorbs everything. So every bump that comes through the cabin, you don't feel it go all the way into the fillings in the back of your mouth. It's not a bone shaker by any stretch of the imagination, nor is it this big floaty floppy thing either. It's got enough composure in the corners that if you do want to drive with, let's say, a little bit more enthusiasm, it's not rolling over on top of itself. It does hold the line very, very well. There is a nice bit of meat to that steering feel. It gives you, well, it gives you a bit more confidence is probably the easiest way to describe it. I have to admit, my pulse isn't exactly racing while driving this car, but it's by no means a bad car to drive. It's really nicely set up in that respect. The suspension is well judged. The brakes have enough bite, although like with many plug-in hybrids, that last couple of kilometers an hour as you come up to a traffic lights, there is that little bit of, is it the electric motor slowing you down or is it the friction brakes? It's still something that could be a little bit more refined, but probably a lot of people aren't necessarily going to pick up on that. What they are going to pick up on is that headline 300 horsepower figure. Yes, it's good. Do you need a 300 horsepower SUV? Not really. It does just give it a bit more legs if you're on the motorway. You need to do a quick overtake. Despite the fact that there is a sport function which gives you all that power all at once, it doesn't really do a whole lot else. There's no augmented sound piped through the cabin to make this thing sound like a V8, and it's the better for it because, well, nobody really needs that. It's just got that good solid mid-range thanks to a bit of torque fill from the electric motor, and that's fed by a 14 kilowatt hour battery. Now, Opel says that will give it around 81 kilometers in a city. Realistically, you're going to probably have to take a little bit off that. Opel also reckons you can probably get on average about 60 kilometers from the battery with a full charge. So that's not that bad. It's a respectable enough figure, and it should suit most people on their daily commutes, provided you do keep plugging in and keep it charged up. The good news in that respect is that it can be done in as little as 2 hours to recharge the battery. So even if you do a school run and you go to work, there's a good chance that even if you plug it in at home or at your place of work, it's going to be back fully charged pretty quickly. And that's good news, because it means you're going to use that combustion engine less for the day-to-day stuff, and it means you can keep that fuel for when you want to have a little bit more fun. So, well, is it fun? That's the big question a lot of people are going to ask. If I'm honest, not really. It's not an exhilarating drive, it's not thrilling, but it's quick, it's brisk, and it's just how the whole thing is put together that really helps it a bit. But this is a heavy SUV. This, you do feel that battery weight, the added weight that is part of that electrified powertrain. It's always there, even in the twistier corners. You can just be more aware of the weight that's there. So I don't think you're going to rush out and sell your Volkswagen Golf GTI or your Fiesta ST and get this instead and be entirely happy. After all, this is not cheap. It's close to 60,000 euros in Ireland, and well, that price may vary depending on where else you're watching it, but that's quite a hefty price to pay. Now, you do get some nice gear inside. Apart from the nice steering, the suspension setup that I've already mentioned, you do get slightly sportier seats. Obviously, being Opel, they're still sensible and AGR approved, so they're going to be quite good for your back, and there is a lot of back support in here. I think they could almost be a little bit too firm if you ask me, but they hold you in place reasonably well through the corners. So you do have that. You've got a fully digital instrument display in front of you and a nice big touchscreen. But then again, you get those with the regular Grandland nowadays too. Yes, it does have a little bit more power, and yes, really, it is much better set up in terms of steering and suspension. Of course, it's not all about driving flat out everywhere in the Grandland GSe. It is, after all, a plug-in hybrid, and for most of the time, that is really what's going to be the draw for a lot of people to have this car. Yes, it has a pretty decent range, and you do have various drive options, so you can leave it in hybrid, or you can actually put it in pure electric mode. And when it's in that mode, well, it's very nice to drive. It's comfortable, it's quiet, most importantly, and it is smooth. That power delivery is quite nice, and if you've got a heavy traffic-laden commute, well, it just takes some of that stress out of it. That is something that cannot be overlooked with a car like this. The big question is it sporty enough to warrant that GSe badge? And well, it's not really a performance SUV. It's better off thinking of this as a range-topping model.